Hello and welcome back to another video on Subway Builder. We are here in Philadelphia, a little bit further in the future where we left off in the last video. I've let this run for a few days so we could build up our money a bit. So we're back up to almost 1 billion in cash. We only let it sit for a couple of days. I believe we ended off the last video around day 16 or 17. So we really just let it run for about a week of in-game time, and we're able to build up a decent amount of money that we can hopefully use to build a new line or two in this video. And so just to refresh, let's take a quick look at our demand stats and see where we sit with all of the residents and workers. So you can see the areas around our lines are slowly becoming more and more this blue color, which indicates that most of those people are using transit. Now, an interesting thing I recently discovered is you can actually click each one of these nodes and it breaks it down into the population. So over here, you saw us click that bubble, that breaks it down into a bit more of a in-depth view of the population that lives there. So I believe this means there's 3,000 residents that was in that bubble that we clicked, and it looks like it's broken out into 25 different population groups. And so here is all of them broken out. You can see this one actually has a plane next to it, which means that this one commutes to an airport, which we've already identified is down here. And so there's some other useful information here, such as departure time, so you can see when everyone in this one bubble leaves for work. So you can see most of them leave in the mornings, some of them leave in the afternoons for night shift workers, and then arrival times. There's this little info button. So this is when workers leave their office to come back home. So this is when our population in this bubble are done with work and heading back home. And then it's also interesting, it shows you the nearest stations and how far away it is to walk to them. Now, I believe how this simulation works is each population group values their time differently. And so some people will take transit because they don't mind having a 50-minute commute if that includes public transportation. And then there are some people that I believe want as much of a direct route as possible, and so our transportation will have to be pretty efficient in order to compete with driving in that sense, since driving is pretty much as close to point-to-point transportation as you can get, unless their destination sits right along one of our existing lines. And so this is some pretty cool analysis that we can do to more accurately refine our transit system. So you can see the areas that we can reach. So all these other bubbles, I believe, are the destinations of the people in this bubble here. So this is where everyone works. So this one just turned blue, which I believe means everyone that wants to work here from this node is taking transit to get there. It obviously makes sense. A lot of the bubbles closer to that node would be green because there's no point in taking a subway 5 or 6 blocks north. So in that sense, the walking makes sense. And then these other bubbles that are red is obviously them driving because our current subway system does not get people close enough for them to walk there. And so all that is reflected in here, and if we wanted to isolate this even more, say we see this group of 105 people, they're all driving. If we wanted to get them more involved, we can actually click on that population group and we can see how they're getting to their destination. So this person wants to come over in this area, which we obviously have no public transportation to, and so they drive, and it's pretty neat that it also shows you the route they take to drive, so that if you have a line nearby, you can sort of see what you're competing with. Now there is some more information here. I think the simulation does get pretty in-depth with the math on valuing pathfinding. So there's a driving cost, a parking cost, and I believe it weights that against our transit fare, as well as times and other metrics in order to determine how the population gets to and from work. And so I think that's pretty interesting. We can come back and let's take a look at one that's sort of split up. So this one is about half and half of driving and transit. And so you can see here, we're pretty close to being able to cover this line. I think it's the fact that if someone wants to go to work from here, they have to go north a little bit out of their way and then take the subway west, and then they would have to walk to work. So that makes sense as to why this is split up. I believe each individual person has, again, different values in order of how they value their time and efficiency. So that's why we have a pretty even split here. That makes sense. Maybe in the future that means we can use this information to build a line on this road. I'm not saying that we will because that's pretty close to some of our other existing subways, but it's just neat how we can get that far in detail with all of this. And then what's also cool about this is it works the other way too. So if we know for a fact, say we can cover this bubble and we want to have as many people taking transit as possible, we can click this and see where that population is spread out along. So if we see, for instance, this grouping here, this is actually really good that we get this because we know, because we have their work destination covered pretty much directly on top of a station that we have, that connecting our transit system to this bubble will almost guarantee that a lot of these people will take our subway to their job. And so that's another good way of using this information to our advantage. You can see that up here with some of these bubbles, and especially over here, this group of 5 bubbles are almost all blue, meaning they're all taking our subway, which makes sense because from this direction, this is almost as direct of a route as you can take. So we're only really competing against the cost of driving in terms of how these people view their time. And so I think that's as far in depth as we're going to get with analyzing that map for now. We'll obviously use that later when we start troubleshooting problem areas and when we want to get this overall transit number higher. But for now, we can still pretty much just continue expanding as we wish. And as long as we're covering a decent amount of nodes, we shouldn't really have too many issues moving people around. Alright, and so I think the first thing we're going to do in this video is expand our existing B line, which is our east-west running line. We have a lot of this population up in this corner of northeast Philadelphia. We did something similar with our A line up in North Philly over here, just covering a lot of this population that's just sort of sitting here. So I think we're going to do that with our B line, just keep having it follow up along the river and capture a lot of this population. So that'll be really good. And this might be where we start to deviate a little bit from the existing SEPTA subway system, as I know there is a subway line that runs up in this direction, but I'm not exactly sure which street it follows or where exactly it goes once it gets farther up into northeast Philadelphia. So we're just going to follow a road that makes sense and one that covers as much of this population as possible. We'll see how good that can get, and then we'll probably hope to add 1 or 2 lines here by the end of the video that maybe start to connect a few more of the dots that we have left remaining. And so it looks like we have this road here that seems to be a pretty decent road that we can follow a good portion of the way into northeast Philadelphia. And I believe if we take a look here, it does seem to cover a lot of the areas that we wanted to. This area is a little bit sparse, so maybe we'll have a station skip here. But we can probably have a station here, maybe here, farther up this way, and then especially once we get up into this area, somewhere up here we can have a few stations. And so one cool little tip that we can do is we can pin this window here, so now this sort of becomes a background layer to whatever else we do. So we can build out our blueprints while still being able to see where all of our residential demand comes from. We can also take a look at workers, although as expected there's not really any huge working areas out in this direction. We're mostly going to be picking up people's homes. And so now what we can do is we can build stations. We'll make sure they're 5 meters below the ground, and then we can start building our stations where we want them. So I think we'll start right about here. We'll try to get a nice heavy metro station right on this road. So right there. I think we will sort of skip over this little barren portion of this, and then right over here we can pick up another decent group of people. I think if we can get right at this intersection, that will also work out pretty well. I think let's get one more, and that's going to end up being, I'll say it'll go right here. Might not be the best location for it, but it is right near a bunch of larger population nodes. So that'll be good to make sure we cover. Now let's get our tracks. I don't think this is going to be as simple as just connecting the dots. So we are going to have to avoid a few buildings. We'll just have to slightly curve some of these. But thankfully we can still keep our top speed up pretty high and still be able to connect all of these. So this is probably our longest stretch between stations right here, but we can still get that to work. And then the last thing we have to do is bring this up following this road. And then that can connect to this station pretty easily, just like that. So now we just need to get our crossover in. And let's just double check how much this is going to cost. So this is going to cost us $500 million, $500 million. I don't think that's that bad of an investment considering the area we're about to cover. I think ideally we should get another station in here. And so let's just do that now while we do know that we have the money for it. So we'll build a station and it will intersect right here. And then we can just refill in the tracks. Just like so. And that only raised our costs very slightly to 600 million. And now we get a very decent coverage of residents in this area. We'll build this. It looks like this window might be a bit bugged, so we'll just close it since we know where we're going already. And then let's edit this route and waste no time adding all of these stations to our existing network. So now after confirming that, we can take a look here and see how that has adjusted our frequencies. So we definitely need some more trains. 15 minutes for high demand is pretty slow. I think let's buy 10 more trains and we'll get 5 of those running at high demand. I think we'll get 3 running at medium and then 2 running during low demand. I believe that matches now what we're running on our A line. Yeah, and it's almost also the exact same frequency as well. But I think that's really nice that we're able to match that. I feel like that means now both of these lines will sort of bring in the same amount of money. We can already see all of the red dots over here starting to pop in and out of these stations. That is good to see. This is coming up on our busiest time of day. So a lot of people are going to be heading home right now as it is the end of the workday. And then we'll just pull up this train list info and just keep an eye on this and make sure we're not overloading any of our trains. And so as we come into the morning rush hour, we can keep an eye on this and see if any of our trains get overloaded. We'll also see a warning pop up in the corner. Now I just want to make sure this isn't happening consistently. You can see sometimes when the circles are red, that means they're close to capacity or over. And as long as it's not consistently red, I think we're okay. We won't need to increase the size of our trains or the frequency. If we have a couple of trains that are consistently red, then we should probably do something. But I think especially during peak hours, it makes sense that we'll have 1 or 2 trains occasionally at capacity. And so it looks like we got through the morning rush just fine without any issues. So I'm okay leaving that there. We might be able to start to see what kind of money we're bringing in from that little extension. It looks like we got a little bit of a bump of about 10 million. Now we're making about 72 million per day with that new expansion. Now that could also be that it wasn't a full day of running. We'll have to come back and double check. But now let's take a look around and see if there's any other spots that we haven't covered yet that we could start to cover with a new line. Alright, so some other areas that I can see that we could begin covering is across the river in New Jersey. Right here, there's a decent amount of population, and there is also a few decent work nodes that we could connect to. We obviously won't be getting all the way out to here, but this seems to be a decent area where we could potentially bring people in the future. And so I think having a line coming across the river does make sense. I don't know how far we'll be able to go right now with our budget, but I think the plan I want is we have 30th Street Station here, which as it currently exists is already sort of a regional transportation hub for a lot of rail lines. And so there's already sort of space here because of some existing old rail infrastructure. So I think it'd be nice to continue having this area be a sort of regional hub for a lot of our more longer distance lines. And so I'm thinking we'll keep that. And so we'll have to find a way to come from this area across the river and sort of end the line over here. Now, in real life, I believe the train comes across this bridge, and I do like that idea. I think it makes sense sort of logistically and constructability-wise. So I think I'd like to keep that connection and sort of make that a bit of a, not necessarily a challenge, but pretty much just keep us from just extending this B line straight across the river here. And so I think our new line is going to come across here, and then it'll follow this road all the way through and then connect here at 30th Street. And so I think what we will want to do is also add transfer stations for our B line and our A line as it intersects with this new one. So for our B line, I think it makes sense to have one there. I feel like that's a good enough distance away between stations to have another station in this area. The A line is going to be a little bit crowded, but I do believe that's the spacing in real life. There's sort of a stop here, and then another one here. So I think I'm okay with those being that close. It will slow our trains down a little bit on the A line, but I think that extra coverage won't really be too much of a negative in the long term. And so let's begin planning this out. I think we are going to continue to do heavy metro. I think most things extending from Center City here will be heavy metro. I don't think we'll start doing light metro until we're really getting into some lower frequency, long distance lines that probably wouldn't be drawing in too many people, but they will be long enough that they could, in theory, make money off of it. So the unfortunate thing about this now is we're going to have to go 10 meters deep, potentially deeper, to avoid demolishing some buildings. Let's get this in right about here. Let's see if it looks like that does combine into a station group, so that's good to see. That's exactly what we want. So I believe that means we can have transfers here at this station. And we're going to have to keep all of this 10 meters deep as we go through the city, since our A and B lines will be at 5 meters. We can still keep it at the 1x cost, but if we have to go any deeper than that, we might start running into issues. So we'll add stations there, and then another one again at the intersection of these lines. And it looks like this might be one of the bridge pillars, or maybe it's something else right on the road. But if we go 1 more meter deeper, make this a 2x cost station, we can build it here. I think we'll actually pull it back a bit farther And we'll do something like that. So I think here's where we're going to want to bring up our demand stats, and we'll pin those just so we can continue seeing where our populated areas are. We'll head back to our blueprints. We can bring this up to 5 meters now, since we shouldn't be intersecting with any more of our existing networks. So I think somewhere along here we're going to have a station. And then if we zoom out and take a larger look at the area, I think we can either go up and cover this area, or we can go south and cover this area of people. I think we're going to start out by going south, but this could be a good spot where we could split off 2 separate lines, and then we can sort of have both of them running back into the city. So I think that'll be a pretty cool thing that we could do later on. So we're going to continue to go south. We'll add a station right about here. And then I think we could add one more. I would say this intersection, but I do want to be able to cover some of this. So maybe we'll just throw one right between where those 2 stations would be. So we can have one here, and then we'll have one start a little bit farther down and go here. And I think this is where we're going to leave this line off for now. I think we're already going to be pushing our budget, given that we're adding 6 or 7 new stations already. So that's already going to start to get really expensive. But this is also another station where I think it might make sense for us to branch off. If we sort of zoom out, and you can almost sort of squint and see it, but it looks like there might be an opportunity where we can have some at-grade rail, which would be really cheap and allow us to build for much cheaper without having to demo buildings or worry about road crossings or anything. So it looks like this might be something that's already existing in this area, but if we can pretty much reuse that to our advantage to make a very cheap line, I think that is potentially possible for the future. Plus that allows us to branch off again, have a line that comes out in this direction, and then have another one that continues to go south into this area. So I think that makes sense. And so we'll connect up all these stations, which we should be able to do really without too much of a problem. And then once they're all connected, we'll be back and ready to set up this line. And so unfortunately, after building all those tracks, we can see we do have insufficient funds. Let's just see how close we are. So it looks like we need 1.1 billion in order to do this whole line. And what we could do is we could cut off a station at the end here if we really just wanted to get this up and running. Or we could just wait a few days for the money. But I think what we're going to do is we'll just delete this station. We'll save that money, and then we should be much closer to being able to afford it. So unfortunately, it's still 1 billion, but it's not that much waiting that we'll have to do to get there. So I think we'll just have to wait a day or two to get that money, and then we'll be ready, back and ready once we have the money to build this blueprint. Alright, and after only about 2 days of waiting, we finally have enough money to build this new line. So we have 6 brand new stations that we can bring in. And what we'll do is we'll start a new route. We'll call this the C line. And I believe we're good to just create it. So we'll come in. I guess first we'll have to edit the route and add all of our stations. So we'll come through, add all of these in sequence, and then come back. And we can confirm, bring this up. We'll probably want to let this run so we can buy a couple of trains that we can use for this. So we're gonna have 5 cars per train. We don't have the money for 15 cars, but we do have enough for 10, which I think is a good enough for what this line is. So high demand will currently be 11 minutes, medium and low demand will be at 1 train at 22 minutes. We'll see how good this line ends up being, and if we need to put in more cars on it farther on. But now, as for the next portion of this project that I wanted to do, is we need to add transfer stations on our A line and our B line so that all of this can connect into our C line and just allow for more people to get to all of their destinations. And so we can get a rough idea of how much this is going to cost, since we know these stations are going to be about 5 meters deep. A 5-meter deep station, if we build that and look at the cost, is $75 million. So that's how much we'll need pretty much for each one of these areas. And then we'll also have to be replacing the track. So I think we'll have to save up to about 200 or 300 million in order to get this project done. And so it's going to be a bit more waiting, but we could probably start to see some initial reactions to our C line, even though it's not quite connected up to the other lines. We can look at the demand and see a few bubbles already fully blue using our new line to get into Philadelphia. And then of course we have these workers, which looks like some of these are starting to turn slightly more purple as we're able to bring more people to their jobs. We can take a look at station ridership to start to get an idea of how this is going to go. And so it looks like 30th Street is doing pretty well, but that's also a transfer station, so it's a little hard to tell exactly how many is going to and from there. This station at 4K is already pretty interesting. Remember, this runs on a 24-hour clock, so I'm not sure if these have had all the time in the world yet to get to their most accurate numbers. It looks like this one is struggling a bit. Only 600 people using that one, but maybe once we add the transfer station into this area and we can turn this into a station group, this might bring that number up just a little bit more. But then over on this end, we are seeing a decent amount of people on the New Jersey side of the river starting to take this subway into Philadelphia. Alright, so now we have a decent amount of money to where I think we can start to at least put in one of our transfers, and I think we're going to start here with the B line. Now the reason why we have to sort of have all this money ready straight away is because currently we can't just delete tracks if there's a line running on them. So unfortunately what we're going to have to do is come to the B line, and we're going to have to edit the route and completely get rid of everything that runs out this direction on the line so that it's no longer pathed through that segment of track. And I believe we also have to wait for the trains to get out of that area. So if we confirm the changes and let that go. Or actually, the reason why this is routing up here is because we don't have a crossover anywhere else. So we'll add one here at Independence Mall. Unfortunately, it's a little bit of money we just sort of have to throw away. And then we're just going to have to get rid of one of the stops here at Independence Mall. And now that these tracks are back to grayed out, we can come into our blueprints and delete this segment of track. And then we can come in and rebuild our metro stations. Let's see if this is close enough for a group. Yeah, unfortunately it's not. So that's going to be a little bit of trouble. We should have thought about this, but hopefully we can squeeze this a little bit closer to these buildings. It looks like we might have to just demolish some of these buildings, or we can just move this station over on the C line. Actually, it looks like this does create a station group. I think we just had to zoom out a little bit farther so that these sort of uh, aren't split into their distinct names, but we can see that this node moved over to sort of split between the two stations. So I think this is a group now. So thankfully we are able to get that to fit in here. And so then all we have to do is just close up these tracks a bit more. And we'll try to keep this top speed up. And then just have that come and fit in there. And I believe that should be all that we need to do. And we have just enough money. This is going to cost us 116 million, but I do think it's going to be worth it. We just have to come back into our beeline and add in all of these stations yet again. And so now with all those stations added, we can continue. Everything still looks good with our frequencies. We might have to add one more train on the high demand, but now we can see this is a station group. B and C are right here under Flores Street. So now we at least have one connection here between our line into New Jersey and our main subway through Philadelphia. So that should help with a lot of connections people have, because before they would have to come all the way to 30th Street Station before being able to go anywhere else in Philadelphia. So having this transfer here will be good. And then of course, once we save up about another 100 million, we can easily get another one on line A coming across here. And I think that'll really help out with our ridership. And as we wait to build up money, we can take a look at some of this station ridership information that we have here. And I was looking just quick at the transfers to see if this is working. And we do have 3K of transfers here. It seems like the stations actually don't have to be on top of each other to count as a transfer. I think they just have to be within walking distance of each other. But I think in order for it to be a station group, they do have to be right on top of each other. So I guess that's something to take note of, because right here this has 3K transfers. It seems like that's probably people walking between these two stations, or maybe even from this one to City Hall. Same thing here, this might be from people coming off on our C line, walking over here to this station on the B line. And so I guess that makes sense. It is nice to see that the game does have that functionality built in, and that the stations don't have to be right on top of each other for people to realistically transfer between one line to another. So that's good to keep in mind. And if we look at our route ridership, this number hasn't gone up too much, but we can see our A line and B line competing. Those are both very much near the top at 65,000 and 54,000 roughly on each of those lines. And then of course our C line, which as expected isn't that critical of a line, all the way down at 13,000 people. It has gone up slightly since we added this transfer, because that just allows more people to get to their destinations quicker. But I don't expect this line to really be competing with our A or B lines anytime soon. And after just a bit more waiting, I do think we have enough money to add our A line transfer right here. So let's pause. We're going to have to come back in and edit this route. Now this one's going to be a little tricky, as there are a lot of stations on the A line, and we want to make sure that we can unclick these and we're not clicking any other lines. So all of these that run south are going to have to go away. And then we're going to have to bring this up until we find a crossover. So it looks like all the way here. We'll confirm those changes. Now, let's just see real quick if we can do this blueprint without having to let the game run. Yeah, it looks like we do have to let the game run a little bit for the trains to get to where they should be. But if we only do it for a little bit, it shouldn't mess up too much of our city. So it looks like that's gone now. We can build a new station right across here, and then just connect these up with tracks. Nothing too crazy. This one's actually cheaper at just under 100 million. We'll build that and then get back into our A line and add all these stations back in. All right, so after letting this run for a little bit, let's take a look at some of the information to see how our C line has affected our finances and other things. So you can sort of see the little bump when we added the C line. It looks like we got a decent amount of increase in profit. It looks like this is after we expanded our B line. That proved very effective, bringing in an extra 20 million. And then really we didn't see too much of a bump when we expanded to New Jersey. Only maybe $3 or $4 million of extra money coming in from that. So it's a little bit unfortunate to see it's not working out too well just yet, but at least it's not losing us money. I wonder if there's a way we can look more specifically at our C line and see if we can see how much money it's making us, but it looks like at best we can just see some of the ridership info. And so really this is all we have to really help us understand what's going on with this line. And now these numbers aren't terrible. I mean, we can come back and look at our route ridership. This is still sitting at about 13,000 riders. The only thing I can think of is some people might benefit from higher frequency trains as they calculate the value of their time. And then another interesting thing, we can come in here and it does look like some people are starting to use our stations. We could click into some of these red bubbles and see, maybe start to diagnose why some people aren't using our transportation. So we can see here, these people live right next to this station and they actually work very close to this station, but for some reason they're choosing not to take our transit system. You can see only 46 people out of the total of 183 people in this node are taking our transit, which is shocking given how almost direct it is to how their existing line is. But what we can see here is by taking transit, this says it's a 25-minute walk to, I assume, what appears to be this station. Or no, it is this station. So maybe that has something to do with the frequency and the time they have to leave, because they leave at 4:30 a.m. and we only have one train running every 20 minutes in our low demand hours. And so in order for them to take the train to their job, it's 40 minutes compared to their driving time, which is 8 minutes and 26 seconds. And so I assume that makes sense. I don't think this line is long enough for us to justify adding another train for that group of commuters. Now, if we take a look at one of the other nodes, these people just work in the complete opposite direction, so that makes sense as to why they're not doing anything. And then all of these people are taking the train. That would obviously make sense. And then we have these people which just can't get to their job effectively from our stations. So that'll have to be something that comes in the future. Maybe we have a little branch off on the B line that comes south as well, and then this might be a feasible route for them to take. But it does look like we are covering a lot of the bubbles in this area, or at least partially, as a lot of them are purple. Right here's another big one. If we take a look at maybe the largest one, yeah, again, it looks like we would benefit from bringing our B line south along the river. And that might actually be a good project that we do here soon. as I think there is a lot of potential along the river that we're just not able to capture with our A line. It seems like right about where this road is the farthest that people are willing to walk from, just based on where these red bubbles are popping up from. And so if we can get a beeline running probably along this road, and then maybe it comes down this way, I think that can cover a lot of the people in this area, which should help us out a whole ton with getting maybe some of the people from New Jersey to their work destinations. And so I think probably the last project we're going to do here in this video, now that we have about 300 million saved up, I think we're going to add 2 more stations and get to this intersection on our B line, because I do really want to extend it out this way. We mentioned before there is a good amount of population to tap into over here, and so having this extend out would really help flesh out our B line and probably bring it to be our most used line after the A line. So we'll throw a station in there, and then I think the other station is going to have to go here, and those two would pretty much cover everything we need. And so we do need 550 million in order to do that. So I guess we were a little ambitious with what we wanted to do. We'll just do 1 extension for now, which should still bring in a lot of new people on this line. And that only costs us 300 million. So we'll do that. We can just easily extend our B line, and we'll confirm those changes. We'll let this run. And then taking a look here, I think we might want to bring up our high demand up just 1 more train to 6, and then our medium up to 4. I'm debating on if our low demand should get 2 or 3 cars. I think once we get this last station in here, we can bring this up to 3 trains, but for now we'll leave it at 2. And so I think the spread that we have right now works just fine. We'll see what happens over time as people come in and out of that station, and we see the increases to our revenue from it. And then another thing we can start to look into is actually having 10 cars per train instead of 5. Since this is starting to be a pretty heavily populated line, especially through Center City, having that extra capacity could help out a lot, and then we can also reduce the amount of trains that we're running. So maybe instead of 6 trains of 5, we can run 4 trains of 10, and that'll still have us at a decent frequency, but with a much higher capacity. You might be seeing that we're getting this warning label pop up more and more as we're adding these stations. So that just means that there's more people wanting to take these lines, and some of our trains are getting over capacity. But I think for now, that's going to be pretty much everything we cover in this video. So let's just quickly take a quick update on how things have progressed through this video. So the C line does have some decent ridership at its stations. It looks like it's on par with some of the middle stations on our other lines. So we have 8K here, 7K all the way on the end of our C line. We have 7K at this transfer, which seems a little low for a transfer, but it still might be easier for people to ride out all the way to 30th Street Station. Looking at our route ridership, nothing much has really changed. It does look like our A and B lines are almost dead even on ridership. Our C line has stayed the same since we've built it pretty much. One thing we didn't take a look at is this station is now bringing in a ton of people at 17K, which is exactly why I wanted to extend into this area. I'm sure once we build our station here, this one's also going to pull in a lot of people. But overall, I think that's doing really well. Looking at our demand stats, we're almost at 5% of the population using transit, which is good to see. I think our 50% goal might have been a little bit ambitious. I think maybe if we can target 25 to 30% of people taking transit, that would probably be the most likely scenario. I just think there's probably too many very specific instances of people driving to their job for us to accommodate 50% of that. But I think if we can get to 25 or 30%, which is 1 in every 3 or 4 people taking transit, that would be a little bit more realistic and much more achievable than the 50% that I mentioned before. And then a quick review of our finances. You can see the bump we got in just adding 1 station to our beeline added up almost 13 million to our operational profit. And so that's pretty crazy that we can get all of that out of 1 station. But I think that's just a very useful line that we have, and so we're taking full advantage of that. But I think other than that, that's going to be all for this video. Let me know if there's any lines that you guys want to see me build in the future in or around Philadelphia. I'm open to hearing pretty much any idea that is worth entertaining. I think it would be fun to build some lines that don't really exist in real life. That would be fun to explore. And then also continue giving me ideas on some more efficient naming conventions if you want something more interesting than just A, B, and C. But other than that, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If you have any suggestions or feedback, leave a comment below. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.